Over the weekend, this boils completely out of control, and you have Nick Fuentes. Well, I should say this did begin with Dan Bilzerian saying that he thinks that Nick Fuentes is a Fed. Basically, the reason he's coming to that conclusion is the same line of logic that I'm using, that it doesn't seem as if there's ever a candidate that Nick really gets behind, especially in America First one. And oftentimes he goes against them loudly, proudly. And Nick didn't take that kindly, nor should he. For the record, if Nick is not a federal agent or informant, then I would expect him to be very, very angry about the accusation coming from Dan Bilzerian, which, by the way, you'll note I have not made that accusation, nor do I intend to in this episode. But Nick Fuentes responds on May 8th saying, "The first time I met Dan Bilzerian at his house, he had us put our phones in another room, then asked me how difficult it would be to assassinate Israeli government ministers. Then he invited me to Dubai and Qatar, which I declined. On his way there, he was ambushed by the FBI." So let's pause there and see if this claim is valid. Does Dan Bilzerian actually take cell phones from house guests?
Oh, you're such a fucking attention whore, bro. I take people's phones in my house all the time. You also signed an NDA, by the way, dipshit.
It's true. Dan Bilzerian takes the phones of his house guests. Now, you might find that odd, and certainly I think for normal people standards, that would be odd. But if you're a very wealthy, powerful, influential person who's also talking about third rail topics and doing so in a very aggressive fashion, I can understand wanting to have some precautionary measures in place. So Dan Bilzerian, in my opinion, was actually being smart about this, that if you're going to have people over to your house, especially to meet them for the first time, and you only know them because of their internet persona, it would be wise to make sure that they can't record what you have to say, that maybe they sign an NDA so that they can't, rat you out to the New York Times or something crazy like that. So while I agree it's not the most normal thing in the world to do, it's also understandable for someone in Bilzerian's position, this kind of, I don't know if he's a billionaire, but 100-millionaire playboy who's undoubtedly kind of under the watchful eye of the intelligence agencies, I think would be fair to say. Lucas Gage responds to Nick Fuentes' post and he says, "Holy fuck, Nick, I swear to God, he did the same thing to me. He walked me and Jake up to that room with the batting cage. We put our phones on the couch and went up to that secluded room with the big TVs. He asked me about where Ben Shapiro lived and how he could be taken out." Nick responds, "This is getting really weird, man. I wonder if anyone else has had similar experience. Seems like his move was to invite all of the prominent JQ influencers to his place in 24-25. Maybe the whole thing was like an Epstein-style honeypot. I just thought he was really dumb." Lucas then responds, "I've only told one person about this and they can confirm." Now, it's important to understand the Lucas Gage role in this. Lucas Gage was kind of a Nick Fuentesian, Dan Bilzerian level figure in the JQ, alt-right, whatever you want to call it. And he has come out over the past week basically disavowing all of his opinions when it comes to Jewish people and Jewish influence and all that. So he has made the big pivot, but Nick is essentially teaming up with Lucas Gage to smear Dan Bilzerian, who's going up against one of the most ardent Zionist congressional members in Randy Fine. It's interesting bedfellows, is it not? And it gets more interesting in that Tim Pool seems to be backing up Nick Fuentes over Bilzerian as well.
Largely on issues of race, and but he made a few important points. One, he called out Candace Owens for lying.
That's good.
But he also pointed something else out recently. Tucker Carlson meets with heads of state in Middle Eastern countries. This is not something a podcaster does. This is something a government actor does. Tucker Carlson is not just some journalist or podcaster. He is of worldly affairs, negotiating and cutting back deals and advising.
Found this admission by Tim absolutely fascinating, especially since he and I have been, I don't want to say beefing, but we've been throwing internet blows at one another. Kind of like, stop. But Nick has fed jacketed Tucker many times. He has said that, his dad was Air America and he's a CIA agent, and it's highly likely that Tucker is either an agent or an asset himself. And I just think it's absolutely unbelievable that Tim is backing up Nick Fuentes on those accusations against Tucker Carlson, and his evidence being that Tucker Carlson meets in private with foreign heads of state when Tim Pool very famously met with Bibi Netanyahu, I think about a year ago now, in private with Chatham House rules where you're not allowed to report on the actual things that were discussed at that meeting. And I'm like, Tim, really? What he's saying there is that his own actions put him in the category of being a government asset of some variety. So if he actually believes that about Tucker, why is it applicable to Tucker, but not to him? I don't understand. And what's even weirder about the accusations from Tim is that obviously Tucker Carlson is not just a podcaster. He was the #1 nightly news guy on cable TV for like a decade. So he is big time. He's much bigger than podcasting, even if he is a podcaster at this point. But he is also the most successful right-wing political commentator and podcaster that exists today. So the fact that he is going around and doing things that maybe Barbara Walters would have done on 2020 when I was growing up, yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense that you're going to have a guy like Tucker Carlson that has the clout, the gravitas to actually get a meeting with a foreign head of state, as he did with Putin and other foreign dignitaries. Like that is valuable journalism. So I don't view that as evidence that Nick Fuentes is correct and that Tucker Carlson is some sort of government asset. That doesn't mean that he's wrong. It just means that that's not proof of that. So I found it absolutely jaw-dropping that Tim would say that, yeah, he's not just a journalist. That makes him a government agent of some variety. And to be honest, what got my hackles up was a few days prior to that when Steven Crowder weighed in.
I interviewed Nick Fuentes. I would do it again. I thought it was productive. I thought we got some important questions. I think you're allowed to interview whoever you want. Tucker walks it back, but he lies, or at least, no, he lies while walking it back. Here.
I wish I hadn't done the Fuentes interview because...
Really?
Yeah, it was totally not worth it. I mean, it was like kind of interesting, I guess, but it was used as I added to the distraction. What I really wanted to talk about was where we were going in this war with Iran.
Iran, and I searched the transcripts. You guys can, it only came up once. Once. In other words, there'd be nothing precluding him. He also sat down, Nick told us about this, with Nick Fuentes for dinner for I think 2 or 3 hours beforehand. Throughout the entire interview, the only reference to Iran I could find was Iran is not as big of a threat to us as OnlyFans. I think he did Nick dirty.
Now, I'm going to lose some of you on this part, and that's fine. You don't have to agree with me. But I don't trust Steven Crowder. I don't think that his analysis is sound, and I think that he behaves in a way that makes me feel as if he's got inside track information periodically, especially when it comes to mass shootings or the Charlie Kirk assassination. There are many instances where he is fed information in the 24 hours after a major event that makes me know that he's got inside sources that it makes me doubt his full independence. I'll put it like that. So I find it interesting that Crowder would use Nick Fuentes as kind of a wedge issue to try and attack Tucker Carlson, while simultaneously Nick is actively attacking Dan Bilzerian. It just seems as if there's a lot of, and maybe it's all just organic power struggles as people want to be the biggest right-wing voice, and this is how they get notoriety and clicks and listeners and viewers. Maybe that's all it is. Maybe. But I think it's fair to wonder aloud if it might be something bigger than that.
Great podcast. Clint is tight.